Now, in many ways, Apple remains a trendsetter in the space of consumer electronics, so everything they release becomes very popular and fashionable. We saw that with the introduction of the AirPods, which ushered the blossom of the wireless TWS bud market. And earlier this year, Apple also released their AirPods Max, which are more conventional studio or larger over-ear style headphones. It's no secret that the products can be very expensive, such as the AirPods Max selling for a retail cost of $550. So yet again, there's space for some rivals or clones or imitative versions to exist. This one is called the MGET Pods Max, and it sells for a quarter of the price of the real deal. It's claimed to be one of the best AirPod Max clones that you can find, including having the ability for active noise cancellation, which is real, as well as offering audio transparency mode, and a similar smart case design, which is magnetic, that can turn off the headphones when you pop them in, and it automatically turns on when you remove them, which is very similar, including also some optical sensors that can autoplay and pause music when you're wearing them versus not. Granted, although these are much cheaper than the actual AirPods Max, you are still going to pay a bit north of $100, which is not necessarily cheap. I mean, you can definitely find more cost-effective wireless Bluetooth headphones at that price on Amazon. So this is really for folks that really want to have something that is similar looking, and we'll find out in this video whether the performance, how it kind of stacks up, and generally what you can expect. So here's the packaging. It does look pretty similar to Apple's real box, but it's void of any logos or really any text aside from just an image of the headphones themselves, which at the moment only come in this one color, which is this space gray. And then popping it open, we have just the headphones on top pop out, and underneath we do have access to a few accessories, including down below here a lightning cable, so it uses the same connector pin as the real headphones for charging them up, which is reversible. And then we also get a pamphlet that says designed by Apple in California, and this is definitely a pretty strong one-to-one replica of the overall presentation, including all of the different ways to kind of charge it as well as set it up, even printed in full color. And yes, this clone does also copy the same design in terms of the buttons, such as the digital crown, which you can twist on to do things like change the volume and also do things like skip tracks and play pause. And so it's worth noting that although there are other cheaper kind of clones on the market which have a similar type of design, because they're trying to copy pretty much all the same features one-to-one, that's also why this is going to be one of the more expensive replicas that you can find. But anyways, here we have again the magnetic smart case, which is in the same design as the actual ones, and they are made of this kind of soft touch texture, so it doesn't attract too much fingerprints, although it doesn't really protect it too much, I'd say. You can still kind of make out some of the parts of the headphones, and first impressions would be that for a pair of clones, these are extremely hefty. In fact, they weigh about the same as the originals. Even for a pair of larger headphones, I would say this is slightly above average in terms of weight, and much more than something like small buds, so that's something to keep in mind. Pop these out of the casing, we can notice that kind of in a moment, the buds here shortly will have a LED light that turns green, which means that they will now turn on and start to connect with your device. Inside has a soft touch kind of microfiber textures, which kind of prevents the headphones from getting scratched. And now the headphones themselves, a few other remarks being that the actual part here on top is made out of a polycarbonate plastic. So that's one of the areas where the clone is still not up to the originals in terms of it's not made out of a piece of metal. The majority of the weight is coming from this headband, which does feel extremely close in terms of all the actuating parts. The fact that you can kind of pull on this to extend the length, you can see is all made out of metal, and even the top portion, which is coated in a layer of soft touch rubber underneath here, is still made out of metal because it's extremely rigid and heavy. You can't really tell the difference from afar, and if we look a little bit more closely, we can observe some placement of microphones that helps it with the active noise cancellation, and for making phone calls, we have just a lightning port and an LED status light. As aforementioned, on the top we do have the digital crown, which you can rotate, and overall it's pretty easy to actually twist on to change the volume, play and pause, and skip tracks, as well as the side key here for manually turning the active noise cancellation on or off and cycling between the modes just by long pressing for a few seconds. We can also flip around to see they are labeled left and right, and the padding is also magnetic just like on the originals, which you can remove to kind of swap them out, to wash them or replace them, and they can be popped back in. In fact, if you pick up original kind of cushions for the AirPods Max, they will also work with these, which is, again, pretty shocking in terms of the level of detail that they've copied over, and you even have some of the branding and logo details just like the originals. You can also kind of make out some of the drivers inside, which is definitely a much larger size for sure than what you can get from a pair of smaller buds. So technically that should provide bigger kind of bass and more impressive sound. Anyways, we can also notice the IR sensor here for detecting if you're wearing these or not. That's the auto play and pause sensor. This also means that the wearing experience and comfort is pretty much identical to the actual AirPod Max, which is to say, again, these aren't the lightest headphones in the world. So personally, I found that if you're wearing these for, let's say, hours and hours, there might be a little bit of stress, but most of it is mitigated by the cushion on the top, which is made of this kind of mesh material. It's almost like what you'll find from an ergonomic office chair. And as a result, it does help alleviate the pressure a bit. Not really as meant for fitness per se, but if you're sitting down in the office or commuting, these are definitely going to be still very comfortable. So anyways, in terms of the connection process, if we now turn over to an iOS device, we'll see that pretty much they will connect instantly, and it calls itself the AirPods, and even go into Bluetooth. And if you tap on the AirPods Max and go under the information, find all of the same settings that you can control from the real deal, such as being able to turn on or off noise cancellation, going to the audio transparency mode, as well as even adjusting the digital crown. If you want to rotate it front to back or back to front, go under the tutorial section. You can even find the AirPods Max showing up, and it will pop this up and recommend for you to check out this tutorial to better learn about the functions on the headphones. So for all intensive purposes, it's basically recognized as a real AirPods Max by your iOS device, which is pretty crazy. In fact, here's an example of the pop-up notifications, especially when we're trying to pair it for the first time. Moving into performance and audio quality, it's a little complicated because on one hand, I was surprised by the fact that they did sound better than I was thinking for a pair of replicas or clones for sure. But on the other side of the spectrum, again, these sell for over $100, so they should also be better sounding than some of the really low-cost clones or kind of cheaper headphones. There's definitely a lot of bass, which is a good thing. So if you are a bass head, you'll definitely enjoy the thumps in the lower frequencies as there is a drum beat that hits. EDM music, rock music all sounds pretty satisfying, which is good and kind of expected because there are these larger drivers. And interestingly, even the trebles when it came to vocals and mids as well for instrumentals didn't sound too shabby. They were actually relatively clean. I was able to hear the textures of singers' voices, and it wasn't too distorted or tinny either. So overall, it was pretty easy, surprisingly, to get immersed in the music and just really enjoy whatever genre that I was listening to, especially for pop music. Everything actually sounded very good, and it was loud and clear. Didn't really hear any hints of hissing or distortion in the background since they are using the latest Bluetooth 5.0 chip. If you are using them side by side with the real AirPods Max, you'll probably still be able to detect more details out of the real deal in some of the areas such as trebles and just picking up even more nuances in the sound. But I have to say that this gets surprisingly close, so perhaps the audio quality I would rank it to be maybe 80% as good, and you'll be able to see how the volume will also be adjusted correspondingly on the top of the device, so I can bring it down more quietly. And with larger headphones like these, it's never been as extreme as smaller TWS buds, since the left and right sides are still connected together. So these will definitely work when it comes to watching back movies, and even if you're doing a bit of gaming and they don't feel like they have too much lag compared to what you're looking at on screen. And you can kind of hear the audio also start to play back here. Let's actually try maybe giving a quick sample if we turn up the volume a bit. So of course, in person, it's going to sound a bit better because with headphones, it's a little harder to pick up compared to, let's say, a speaker that is easier to show in a video like this. But as a result, you can actually detect that even if we pause the music, there's no hints of any static or white noise in the background, so fairly clean. And again, even at higher volume levels, they don't sound too tinny or shrill either. So when we talk about the noise cancellation, this is one area where the clones are definitely not as good as the real deal. Even though there is ANC that's built on in, it is kind of subtle, I have to say. So if you're in a room that has a engine sound or fan noises, it does get slightly muffled and reduced, but not really to the same level. Even battery life was actually quite good. In terms of standby mode, I left it overnight without even putting it into the case, and it only dropped about 10% or so in terms of battery, and in terms of continuous music listening, I was at least able to use it for 10 hours of listening time before I needed to recharge it again, which really isn't shabby. Although clones, especially in the past, have gotten a pretty bad reputation for having really poor quality, and usually it's still advised to get the real deal in terms of supporting that company. I have to say that these particular replicas are not half bad in terms of they actually do have decent sound quality, a pretty good connectivity. Granted, it's not the cheapest thing in the world, but overall I think it is something that fits in within that price segment in terms of performance. Overall comfort is also quite good, borrowing Apple's design of course. Construction quality not bad, though I do wish that the pads here were made out of metal instead, but everything else does feel pretty solid. If you really do like the design of the actual kind of AirPods Max, this gets close to being around maybe 70%, as good as the originals when it comes to the overall performance, sound, and everything combined. But obviously you are getting a price here that is lower than 70%. And you can find out more details if interested in the links below. But for now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews.